So a lot of people have asked me to help them with co-parenting, parallel parenting, things like that regarding their narcissist. And I have offered many different little bits of advice because I have a child with my narcissist. Well, I had a child that I gave birth to because I was with my narcissist, but in reality, I don't really consider him part of the whole deal. What it all comes down to, in my case, my narcissist just did a ghosting act on myself and the child. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with directly co-parenting with one. I did more of a single parent / only parent with that child. Now, of course, my current husband did jump in and help. But what I have brought for you today is a special interview with someone you probably know who has his own YouTube channel, who is a father, and who is someone who really understands going through divorce with children. So that's what we're talking about today at queenbeing.com. Get ready, I'm about to introduce you to him. Let's get started. My name is Angie Atkinson, and on this channel I offer free daily video coaching to help you discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse in toxic relationships. I like to call it toxic relationship rehab. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button and let's get going. All right, here we go. I'm going to introduce you to Dad Surviving Divorce. Let's go. All right, everybody, I have for you a very special guest today. His name is Duane. He is from the channel that you've probably heard of called Dad Surviving Divorce. He has started a YouTube channel May of last year. He was in a 22-year marriage with a narcissist, which was, according to him, a bit of a nightmare. Although he had a good core group of friends, he had a few friends who were narcissists as well, as we've all experienced. Now, in his job, he does a lot of one-on-one mentoring, so that led him to start his channel because he wanted to help other people who have been through the same kind of hell he's been through. And he said that when he first started the channel, he did not really find a whole lot of non-parents. He didn't find a whole lot of parents out there that were talking about how to co-parent with a narcissist during a divorce. So I thought this was really interesting and something that you all would be very interested in as well. So, Duane, welcome to the channel.
Oh, hi, Angie. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you. Give me an opportunity to talk to your audience.
My pleasure. And so, Duane, I was hoping that Duane would tell his story today and kind of give us a little insight on what he's been through. So, Duane, tell me about that marriage that you went through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like as a typical, probably for most of your viewers as well. I mean, I came from family of origin that had a lot of problems. Now, at the time, I didn't really realize it. So when I met my wife at the time, which I was 19, it was a whirlwind romance. All the love bombing and the mirroring and all that stuff happened. And, I thought I found the one. So, I committed. Everything was great for, like about 3 or 4 months. And then things started to change. And then I just figured, okay, well, that's just what happens, right? I mean, okay, I was hoping it was going to be different, but this is what I've grown up with. This is whatever all my friends say happens. So this just must be normal. So I guess, I love her. She loves me. And, we'll just press on. Yeah. And that, I'm sure, everyone who's gone through this realizes there's a lot of red flags, right? When I look back, I can see all the different things that should have been, were just screaming, what the real situation was. And I will also say, as is very typical, she did tell me on multiple occasions who she really was. I just didn't want to believe it. So, I mean, to try to fast forward, it was a 22-year marriage. Actually, everything started falling apart about 21 years. And I was a dutiful source of supply. Now, I'm not saying that I was, the number one best guy in the world. Everyone has their issues, but I was devoted to the relationship. I thought fundamentally that we loved each other. What happened is towards the end, I mean, and it was a nightmare for the entire time. I mean, I was I've always felt stressed. I always felt anxious. I always felt depressed. She did an outstanding job of making it feel like it was all direct, or it was all coming from me. I remember a lot of times I would look at her and go, wow, I am so lucky I have such a person in my life. I'm like, I'm such a mess, and I just can't seem to get things right, but at least I have this wonderful person, not realizing that I was being undermined on a regular basis. And anytime it was like she was controlling my happiness. Mm-hmm. If she was okay with me being happy, then I could be happy. And if I was happy and she decided that, no, that's enough, then, something would happen. There would be some type of gaslighting or whatever. So I went through that we waited to have kids. So, I mean, you look at the marriage, and if anyone's watched my channel, it's like, wait a minute, your kids, I mean, I have an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, and an 11-year-old who will be turning 12 here in a few weeks, or in August. Sorry, I got my months wrong. But so, I waited. I was in the military. We met before I went into the Air Force. Didn't have kids until I got out of the Air Force. I think I just didn't want to be trapped. And I was really worried from my own family about having kids. But so, as is typical, right after we got out, we had kind of a blow up. Some of the reasons I was like convincing myself to stay, I was just really tired of it. And at one point I'm like, you know what? I can't deal with this crazy anymore. Now this is probably around year 8, maybe 7 or 8. And we had a conversation, and I was like, you know what? Fine. You can just go back home if you need to, whatever. And everything changed. You can probably relate to this, or at least with a lot of your clients.
Yep.
The love bombing restarted again. Everything got better. I was like, oh my God, we had this conversation. Everything is great. We ended up, she got pregnant. We had our first child. He has a disability. I've talked about that on my channel. So, in my mind, I was looking for those little breadcrumbs, those little nuggets to make me feel like this was great, right? Like I mentioned before, we dated a really short amount of time. Those relationships shouldn't, statistically shouldn't last. 22 year, or, towards the end, 20 plus year marriage, that's a pretty good milestone. I mean, once it's like, hey, you're over the hump.
Right.
And I think with my son, when that happened, then we're focused on dealing with him and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff was put on the back burner, and we're just focused on him. He almost didn't make it. He had cerebral palsy, so he had a level 3 bleed in the brain. I mean, when he was born, he was in the NICU for like a month. When they released him, I don't think they really thought he was going to survive. It was not a good time, right? But so we made it through that. And in my mind, I kept looking for situations where it's like, oh, okay, well, we made it through the short courtship. We've been married for a while. We waited to have kids. We're waiting until year 7 or 8 to have kids. Our communication, I thought, was better, not realizing that it was just her going back into the love bombing stage and stuff like that. So, but it just wasn't right? I mean, everything was just constant stress and just negativity and whatnot. We had 2 more kids, and it wasn't until, and I'm just fast forward to the story. It wasn't until what happened is I started feeling better. I had met some different people who weren't really narcissists. My industry that I work in with the military, and then subsequently when I got out, has a lot of those, most people say type A personalities. Type A has a real strong tendency to also be narcissist. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I was used to that environment. And I ended up meeting a buddy of mine who was the most positive, caring guy I've ever met, right? I mean, he really actually changed my life, and everything started to change for me. And you can probably see where this is going to go. So I started feeling better, right? And everything started going great. I'm like, man, I have a great family. I have a great job. If my job goes away, I have an opportunity. Me and this friend of mine, we're talking about even doing some businesses together. So everything was wonderful. I even ended up getting a promotion at work, or technically promotion. Mm-hmm. I went from running a small section to running a section of 5 different major sections, and everything was great. And then everything went to crap, right? And what happened is my ex, and just to clarify, she has never been diagnosed with any mental illness or personality disorder. Okay. So that's not she's not been diagnosed with NPD or BPD or anything like that. What I'll say is all the traits and all the characteristics she seems to fit, and all the techniques seem to work. And I've developed a few techniques to help because of the having kids and stuff. So, so I mean, it was like everything fell apart, right? I mean, she found a way to undermine everything, and that was basically the beginning of the end. It was like a 6-month period where I ran back down into my depression. I started feeling, unsure about things again. And what happened is, as it started progressing, we started going to marriage counseling, which was obviously ineffective, because you can't, they're not open to it. And the main catalyst was we were having a conversation one day, and she said to me, you don't even know who I am. And like I said earlier, they always tell you who they are. It's weird that they'll almost come up to you and go, I'm going to punch you in, not realistically, but I am this, I'm a horrible human being. Mm-hmm. No, you're not. You're fine, right? We always justify it or whatever. So she said that to me one day, and she said, you don't even know who I am. And I'm like, oh my God, she's right. So I took a step back and I looked at it, and it's like, so the veil started, to lift, the fog started to clear. And I went through a transition. The first part of it was, oh crap, I now kind of understand because who I thought she was isn't who she is. But then I was like, you know what? That sucks, but I love her. She loves me. We have that basic fundamental, baseline, so it'll be okay. And then I started questioning that. And what happened is I even actually at one point I asked her, I'm like, do you care about me? Do you care about the relationship? First time, quick yes. And then when I was trying to like action, do the actions follow the words, right? I talk about that a lot on my channel. I'm sure you do too on yours. And it was like they weren't lining up. And then when I asked again, it was like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. And I'm like, we've been married for 22 years. We have 3 kids. We have this whole life together and you're not sure? I mean, I get it if you're mad. I mean, I get it if you want to say, you're a piece of crap, but I still love you, or I still care about you, or yes, this is important, but I'm mad at you. No. And that was it. I mean, the whole thing blew apart when I realized that I was living a lie. And at that time, I still didn't know about narcissism. I didn't know about personality disorders. I didn't know about any of this stuff. All I knew is that, oh my God, I'm living a lie. I can't do this anymore. I deserve an opportunity to be happy, or to at least not live in this chaos.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, so then from there, I'm sure your viewers can definitely relate to this, or they might even be going through this right now. It was a nightmare, right? Even then I had my idea, okay, she just doesn't want to be with me. She wants to be with someone else. Okay, fine. We'll be able to co-parent. I will wrap my head around the fact that she doesn't love me. But hopefully, we have this experience, it'll be fair. And then the smear campaign started. And basically what happened with that, and this will be very common for people as well. The first time the kids came over to the house, I had nothing in the house. We had a great time. We sat on the floor and ate. We played hide and seek in a big empty house. And, and everything was fine-ish when the kids went home and basically like, hey, everything. And I wasn't calling her for help or, they weren't going back saying, it was horrible. Everything blew up. I got blindsided like most of you, it was just very common in this situation. Mm-hmm. And it was a very dark time. I could not believe how somebody who I loved, I would have done anything for that period of time, in an instant could change. And it was like, I didn't even exist. I meant nothing. And anything from that 22-year period, or at the time it was 21-year period of marriage, was fair game to try to use to smear me, to basically paint me as a horrible father, an abusive person. And it was, I couldn't believe it, it was horrible.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what advice, you said you have some techniques that you recommend that you developed regarding co-parenting, and I'm really interested in those. I think my viewers will also be. So tell me a little bit about that.
So, everyone's familiar with gray rock and no contact, right? That's the staple of dealing with a narcissist. And if anybody has an opportunity, which means you don't have kids, that's exactly what you need to do. And it's a lot easier said than done. Everyone knows that. When you have kids, it's really hard. Mm-hmm. And so and that's what the problem is. Like at one point I tried to go no contact. Now, fortunately for me, I was, by the time I had this epiphany of what I was dealing with, it was like 2 to 3 years into the divorce. Custody was already set. All the court stuff was already done. So I want to say this, anybody who's actively going through a litigation for divorce and trying to set up custody, no contact is not your friend, because your ex can use that to demonstrate that you are a problem. Mm-hmm. So what I've come up with is a technique called hybrid no contact, because, hey, that's a unique name. And it's where you take, basically, I think a lot of people call it limited contact as well, but you take no contact and it's like, okay, what do I have to answer? What is, whenever there is an interaction, what really deserves a response? So that's the first thing. So typically, like on my channel, what I'll talk about is, initially it's gray rock. If you have kids, hybrid no contact, and I have videos on that, and I've even done some live streams where I've actually gone through some emails, interactions with my ex, and my thought process on, okay, this is the email, you can see the snarky comments, this is, and what, how it triggers you and what you want to do and what you should do. And then from that, I talk about from hybrid no contact, because once you get to that foundation, things start to stabilize. Then you go into this absolute thinking. And I know that, we're not supposed to judge people, and we're not supposed to, basically say, I've decided that you're this. But I think it's really critical for people going through this, especially because at that time I was having the very typical problem where it's like, well, is she a narc? Am I the narc? Well, maybe it was okay. Maybe the past wasn't bad. Maybe I'm just exaggerating this to justify it in my head. And when you're going through that, and I'm probably sure you probably went through it as well in the beginning stages of yours, it drives you crazy. And it just amps up your stress and anxiety. So then what I talk about on that is absolute thinking. Just your ex is a narc. Doesn't matter if they've been diagnosed or whatever. They're a narc. If it comes up and you're like, but we used to have such great times when we went to the beach. It's fake. It's an illusion. You know what I mean? It's just like you drive that self into your head. What happens is you get to the point, and you're well aware of this, when you get to the point that you start doing that, when you have those moments where you're having a bad day or whatever, instead of that little voice in your head going, oh, it was, maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're just overthinking it. Maybe you can do this, maybe that. Your new programming starts to override, saying, no, it was a lie, it was an illusion, move on. And that's not easy. Yeah. Then from that, I talk about black hole thinking, which is like, look, they're a black hole. Because and I'm sure you've had this as well. A lot of people say, my ex-husband is doing stuff with the kids that I don't appreciate. Unless it's illegal, immoral, or there's a court order says they can't do it, there's nothing you can do about it. Thinking about it and worrying about it is going to it's going to drive you insane. So you need to think of them as a black hole that whatever is happening, you don't see it, you don't hear it. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And it's not easy to do. None of these techniques are easy. They sound easy. I mean, no contact sounds easy. Oh, but it's not, because no contact just isn't responding to them or blocking them. No contact means you don't think about them. Right. You don't go back and look at your wedding pictures, or you read old love letters or whatever. I mean, it's like no contact means you try to start erasing them out of your mind. Yes. So and then the black hole thinking is just where if, they're taking the kids someplace you don't like, they're introducing them to people you wish they wouldn't, you don't have any control. Your best bet is to realize that, pause, and just not ruminate about it, and take that energy and focus it on making your environment stable. You're building a relationship with your kids and trying to make a safe environment for your kids. Yep.
So, I like to call it parallel parenting. That's what I like to call it, because literally you can't co-parent with a narcissist. You cannot. Do you agree?
I do, and I need to remember or find who wrote this, but I had somebody, I did a video on co-parenting, because that's what people look for, and I was talking about parallel parenting, and they said it's not parallel parenting, it's counter-parenting. And I'm oh my God, that was perfect. But no, you're parallel parenting. You can, and one thing I want to add on that is, people in the early stages of this get into the mode where, they're supposed to share information. I'm supposed to get the report cards, like, my situation, she's supposed to send me the report cards. Well, she won't, right? I mean, then you beat your head against the wall, like you're supposed to co-parent. Go around it. Yeah. Develop your relationships with your teachers, the doctors, and, just get the information some other way. And it's tough, but if you try to force them to co-parent, you're going to, bang your head against the wall and drive yourself insane.
Totally true. I have another question for you. So with your children, what do you do to help them not become narcissists while they're dealing with their narcissistic parent? That's a common question I get on my channel.
So, and that's a really great question. And what, because it's tough, right? Because what you want to do, and what people I think are drawn to do, is to make the correlation with, the other parent. Your mom or your dad does this and it's bad. You and I both know that's horrible. Yep. I mean, you don't want to do that. What I've done, or I've taken to, is this is the problem is that the kids are going to model behavior. So inevitably they're going to do something because they're seeing it. Yes. Take those times, if it's directly with them, take those times to talk to them about that. And I've had some situations I've been able to do that with my middle daughter, because for a while there, it looked like I was a little bit concerned about how that was going and her lack of empathy and whatnot, and was able to have some really good conversations with her and her brother about, the appropriate way to interact with people, the appropriate way to treat people. Is it really good to put people down? Does it really help whenever you're trying to destroy someone else to make you feel better? Right. And conversely, if there's some other type of incident that happens that can be a teaching moment that doesn't directly correlate with the kids will figure it out on their own. It's tough because we want them to figure it out sooner, and we want them to go, oh my God, my other parent's a monster. And that it isn't, more than likely, unless you're dealing with an overt narcissist, it's probably not going to happen because, overt's bad, right? I mean, they're in the kid's face doing something, and then you might have an opportunity where the kids are talking to you about it. But if it's covert and it's subtle, they'll figure it out. Let them know. Make sure your environment is as stable as possible. Try to model proper behavior in your environment, which can be really tough in the beginning stages of this whenever you're stressed and you're worried and you're worried that there are accusations that everyone's going to believe and you're going to lose your kids, and all these horror stories that are being basically told to you are going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I've approached that, and it's tough. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, and the hard part about it, especially early on, is when it's happening, it triggers you and makes you angry about the issues with the ex. Your kids don't understand that, and it's really tough. It's like an internal battle where you have to really control yourself and your composure mm-hmm. to be able to not validate what your ex is saying about you and not have your kids be confused thinking that they're still in the middle of both of you, which ultimately they still are. I mean, it's right. Just a reality.
Right. And so I agree with that. And I think one of the most important things is, even though we want to be like, your other parent is a freaking narcissist and they're terrible, we can't always do that. I mean, it depends on the age of the child and the maturity level. But here's an interesting question for you. I had, and I've answered this question in various ways depending on the age of the child. I had a lady this morning in the live stream who had a 5-year-old boy. And I would love if you would share your opinion as a father on how to deal with a 5-year-old boy who is struggling with narcissistic tendencies, because the father is not there at all. He's modeling the father's behavior, I think, and he's not directly connecting. So I guess my point is, as a father, what would you suggest to this mother?
Well, I think a lot of times women have, men and women have their stereotypes. Mm-hmm. Not always, right? The stereotype is the dad is the authoritative person and the mom is a nurturer. Now, but typically that's the way the case, but not always the case, right? There are some, but here's here's the problem with that is you have to be both, right? Same thing for me. I had to morph myself to where I could still provide structure, and kids need structure. Yes. They'll fight on it. But I've noticed even in my situation, my kids were a little bit older when all this happened. They need that. They need both, right? They need you to provide them structure and stability and love and support. So, it's tough because you have to set boundaries with your kids. You have to let them know that they have confines, because it's like it makes them feel like you care about them. Now, the other thing on this, the kids are going through a nightmare too, right? I think a lot of times people forget that we live the nightmare, right? So we did our own adaptations to deal with it. And I know this doesn't necessarily relate to a 5-year-old, but what I'm saying is that once we realize what it is, it's like it's clear, and sometimes we lose sight of our own struggle with what's going on. So, her son is having issues trying to figure out, well, why is, I'm assuming if I don't know if he was, had left or was, like abandoned, like, so did daddy leave me or that type of thing. What was the specific? Apparently
she says he travels for work and goes abroad all the time, but they're not together anymore, the mother and the father. So I guess he misses visits and stuff like this. So I thought, it's really sad. And I told her, my suggestion was to consider getting connected with like another strong, positive male in her life.
Oh, absolutely.
To help him have a mentor, an uncle or a father or a brother or something. Or even maybe the Big Brother program, because this kid essentially, from what I can tell, doesn't really have a dad. There might be a father out there, but it's not a dad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have a whole thing where I think mom and dad, those are earned titles. So anyway.
Oh yeah, no, actually that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that's some, and then just make sure that the kid's busy, right?
Same thing I said.
Make sure that, play groups, interaction. I think sports is probably a little young for that, but something to where they have other things to occupy their mind and they're actually doing something constructive and building relationships and interacting with people. You got to be a little careful because if they're having problems, they can lash out with the kid, with their little friends and stuff like that. And that could be a little problematic, but it's tough, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. And basically I told her the same kinds of things. And I know when my oldest son was 5, he was able to get involved in certain stuff like
a gymnastics class, which sounds weird for a boy, but he did, and soccer and stuff like that, depending on where you live.
That's cool.
It was fun. Yeah. He had a good time with it. But anyway, so I guess my thing is I think we're on the same page there for the most part. And I liked what you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So let me think. Was there anything? Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you what inspired you. I kind of talked about it at the beginning a little bit, but if you have any other details you'd like to share on what inspired you to start that channel, because I know you mentioned having watched Richard Grannon and enjoying his stuff, but there was more.
So what happened? Oh, that's a really good question too. So because it's really weird if you think that as you start to recover from this, why in the world would you want to talk about it?
Right.
Almost every day, right? Which it does seem bizarre. And I can see sometimes where I get comments from people in the channel where they're like, it'll get better, and it's like, well, it is better, but it's like so. Basically, what happened for me is when I was talking about or alluding to it earlier when it first started, it was really bad. And had, I felt looking back at her, even at the time, that had things gone, just a little bit left or right, it could have been really, really bad. I could have lost my job or, just did something not great. Or even something to myself, not great. Right. And I was like I mentioned, I was very fortunate that it was like the universe was looking out for me. Every time something really bad would happen, something would offset it. And so for me, even early on, as I started understanding what was going on, I was thinking, man, what? And initially, Dad surviving divorce. I was primarily, and when I first started, I figured my channel would be a guy channel. I didn't realize until the first few months that it's a broader, that I still, my subscribership base, our viewer base is like 60% women, over men. I have more women viewers than men viewers.
Me too.
And that was surprising. But yeah, I think all of us go through that too. It's like, it's really weird when you realize how broad, or whether it's a man or a woman, the fundamental traits of a narcissist are basically the same. Who doesn't have the people who pop up at the right time and are just, they're circling, their whole world is collapsing around them. They don't have good support because primarily, unless you know somebody who understands narcissism and understands the issue, their advice is horrible. Just get over it. Yeah. What are you worried about? Everyone gets, every guy loses all their money, or weekend dad's just normal, and it's not really good advice. It's just this more just oppressive negativity. And I was thinking, if I could just find one person who's going through that and who's just, their whole world is falling apart, and maybe they could see, oh my God, this guy went through what I went through and he's made it through it. It's like a lifeline, Yeah. So that was really the crux of it and the reason to do it. It seems crazy, and actually on that, it was one of those things where it kind of came up as an epiphany. Because I always knew I wanted to try to do something positive, like write a book or do something out of it. And it was like one day, it was like a flash of inspiration, and back like a little bit before May. And I started it, and it's been over a year. And and I'm sure you can relate to this. Every time, like every day or every other day, I'll get an email from somebody saying, oh my God, this is exactly my situation. I didn't realize it.
Yes.
Thank you. Right. And it's like, okay, that's the whole thing, is to help somebody get through it, to help them realize they can have a life, that they can rebuild the relationship with their kids, that they can, they're not going to be stuck in this nightmare forever. It's going to take a while. This isn't something that you can fix overnight.
Right.
Which is not fair, but there's a lot of stuff on this that isn't fair.
Agreed.
But that was really the catalyst for doing that.
Excellent. All right. Well, as we're getting ready to wrap up, are there any last minute pieces of advice or, zingers you have to share with my audience today?
Yeah, actually, what I'd like to leave with is anybody who's going through this, there's a couple of key things in the beginning stages. Just because someone is running a smear campaign against you doesn't mean that the accusations are true, and doesn't mean that everyone's going to believe it. Doesn't mean it doesn't matter whether you're the mom or the dad as a target of a smear campaign. Just because someone says you're a horrible mom or you're a horrible dad doesn't mean that everyone's going to automatically believe it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've made mistakes, then you need to start working to correct that. And the second thing is, work to build that stable foundation for yourself and for your children, because that will pay off immensely. For me, I didn't, in the beginning stages of that, I didn't do that. I brought a lot of that stress and anxiety into the house. I made a lot of mistakes by being triggered by my kids, just even when they were being indirectly used or directly or indirectly used as pawns. Mm-hmm. And it just slowed everything down. The sooner you can stabilize yourself and provide a stable environment for your kids, their attitudes start getting better, their comfort level starts increasing. There's still going to be issues, and they're still going to love and want to love the other parent. That's normal. Mm-hmm. But if you can do that from the beginning, you will set the stage that will make this entire process, it's still going to be painful, but it will make it the improvements quicker.
Yeah. And less impact on your children overall. Negative impact, more positive impact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Mm-hmm. We're getting ready.
Yeah, you can't, unfortunately, we can't get around from,
go ahead. Go ahead. Tell me.
No, I say, unfortunately, we can't get away from negative impacts to our kids. We can mitigate those impacts. It's tough, right? Because you want to think, okay, well, I can do all this stuff and it'll be like it didn't happen. There's no way to get around that this is happening. There is going to be an impact. Our job and what we can do is mitigate that, have our kids learn from it. And in some ways, I think our kids can be luckier because if we do this right, they can learn about this. They can learn about the appropriate way to be treated, the appropriate way to treat people, and what to set appropriate boundaries. So as they become adults and they start interacting with people, they don't get trapped in everyone can get trapped in the love bombing stages, but to be able to listen to those red flags, listen to those warning bells, and act on them instead of saying, okay, well, everything is a mess. My whole life was a mess. So this is just normal. So, it's just okay. So there is an impact, but we can do a lot to mitigate that.
And I think another one of our big responsibilities is to actually boost their self-esteem to the point that they are strong and in themselves, but not narcissistic self-focus. You know what I mean? Like standards.
Yeah.
They need to set
absolutely.
setting standards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very good. All right. So
Absolutely.
As we're getting ready to wrap up, let me remind everybody, please subscribe to DSD's channel. I'm going to put the link for you right there. Okay. Hit them up. And any last words before I wrap up, Mr. DSD?
No. I just thank you for taking the time to interview or talk with me. I appreciate it. And I love what you do. You are a beast. I can't believe how many videos you post. I do one live stream a week and I'm feeling good, and you're doing multiple a day and tons of videos. I cannot keep up, but you have a tremendous resource for people, and you do great work, Angie.
Well, thank you, and I love everything you do too. I haven't seen all of your videos, but I have seen a few, and as you know, I popped into a live stream here and there, and I think you're great. I think you have a wonderful personality. People seem to really love you, so I wanted to introduce you to my people as well. So I'm so grateful that you came here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
If you have questions for Dad surviving divorce, please leave them right here below, and he will pop in and answer them. All right, that's all I've got for you right now. Have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for being a part of my day and a part of my life, and thanks for letting me be a part of yours. I'll see you soon.
It's my mission to teach others what I know to be true. You really can create the life you want. Take care of your body, take care of your soul, nurture the real you, and introduce him or her to the world. Be comfortable in your own skin and in your place in this world. Take your spot, take it now, and the universe will take its cue from you. You feel me? If so, subscribe to my channel. Let's get it done together.